All right, and we are live. Hey, everyone.
Hey, folks.
To episode 43, I think.
42. 43 is next episode.
Jesus. I'm really good at keeping track of things, as you can see.
It's all good. It's literally in our...
Yeah. 43.
There
we go. I'm good at keeping track of things. It's fine. Welcome, everyone, to episode 42 of Three Pagans on Tap. This is our... third and final on our Theology miniseries. Not that we won't talk about theology in the future. I'm dead certain.
You're at a pagan podcast. What do you expect?
It's what we do. But, this is the end of our kind of... I won't even call it a deep dive because I wouldn't consider it a deep dive. I would say
no, me neither.
Broad primer on a lot of theology topics.
Yeah, really, really broad.
Well, that's it. Before we get any further, good if I open with a prayer?
Go for it, please.
Hail, Angarabotha. Hail the Iron Witch, Bloody Mother, O wrathful Queen, beautiful and wonderful and sublime beyond all words and understanding. You who howls in the night, you who knows all secret things. You share wisdom with the worthy and guide the initiate down the path chosen. Guarding us well and letting us stumble. Guard us well this night, dear. Pack warm us and keep us all. Best of all.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so because of your new job, you are limited on time. Let us get right into the meat of this.
Yes. So, niceties before we dive into the meat. What are you drinking? What am I drinking?
I am drinking in my Glencairn. I have, I'm not even going to butcher that. It's Irish. A Quiet Man blended Irish whiskey.
Nice.
I've got Rumchata, and I've got Kirkland vodka, which I'm probably going to mix with this cream root beer.
Neat.
Because I am a basic bitch and I have Zevia.
Hey, you're diabetic. It's good for you. That's how it is. Also, I have my windows open because I don't have AC. So if the background noise gets too loud, let me know and I'll close.
Yeah, if your neighbors get too enthusiastic about fireworks, I'll give you a heads up. We'll
see how that goes. I'm a little bit out in... It's a city, but it's more rural than I was, so
Understood.
A lot of booms.
Before we get into the weeds, Theology set finishing on 42 works out perfectly. I agree.
Yeah.
We hadn't planned it, but that's pretty damn funny.
It is pretty funny. I am drinking a cocktail that I developed, spirit-led. I was given, I should say, not developed. I was given for my wedding, called Prince's Vacation.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, that was a good shit.
Which is coconut milk, pineapple juice, orange liqueur, but not like dry curacao, more like Grand Marnier, so the sweet orange liqueurs. A honey liqueur like Drambuie, or in this case, I'm using Irish Mist, and then rum.
Nice.
Which I am using Mackinac Distillery aged rum, which is phenomenal. Yeah. Basically, you throw them together, shake on ice, serve on ice, and it is very, very tasty. Very good summer drink.
Excellent. All right, so let's get into it. Last we were talking about theology. Caveat for anybody that's actually picking this up. These are as deep a dive as you can go for a 1 to 2 hour show. And unfortunately, that like barely scratches the surface in terms of our experience, let alone the depth you can take these.
Yeah. Do we want to just start off with the first on the topics that we
let's
had?
just hit it.
All right. Nature of the soul. All right.
All
Also,
right.
hello everyone in the chat, which is Josie, Eleanor, and Emily. Hello.
Awesome. All right.
All right. Nature of the soul. You hit the heathen stuff. Also, probably you should talk about Kemetic stuff, and then I'll hit other stuff.
Okay, so I'm not as up and up on the Kemetic stuff, and trying to actually like sit down and dissect the nature of the soul, which is something we did in our last show. So without having to go back into it, seriously, watch episode 41 if you folks are a little lost when we talk about different soul lore topics. Long story short is, generally speaking, pagans in general believe in at least a multipartite soul. If they are in any way, shape, or form a theist. For those who are atheist, I actually have heard some folks say that the consciousness or the soul or whatever their equivalent is has a multipart, and it just doesn't include like the immortal soul, like the Sal, or the I believe it's the Ib in Kemetic religion. So, long story short, the multi-part soul is something that you're going to find in most any polytheist animist tradition. So it's just something that seems to weave its way through, and only with the arrival of specifically Christian religion do you get a separation between spiritus and what we now term as the soul. Then the spirit and the soul were separated, and now with the advent of evangelical Christianity and various forms of Protestantism, there's not even that separation between the spirit animating the body and the immortal soul behind it. So even the multi-part soul that Christianity had has also been kind of stamped out over time in a lot of religions.
Yeah. Although I think a lot of that boils down to evangelical Christianity and Protestant in general. I'm painting with a really broad brush, and I'm not being fair, and I'm acknowledging that. Like, I'm intentionally kind of not being fair, but we're doing that.
We have 2 hours maybe to do this, so, broad brushes will be applied. Caveat emptor.
But yeah, I think that their theology is not even surface level a lot of the time, and I think that has a lot to do with why things like multi-part soul isn't a thing. Why? Because they don't really consider the nature of the soul. They just say, I have a soul, it's important, here you go.
Get out of the window, Riker. Sorry, my dog is in the side yard, and he's looking right at me. Like, I can't help you.
That's hilarious.
Anyway, back to theology.
Yeah. So from in your at least understanding from a heathen perspective, what does the soul look like?
A lot of things. You're literally looking at it. When I speak my words, you are engaging with another soul. So the soul looks like a lot of different things. So like the hammer is the one that I have a lot of affinity for. It's the second skin. Some people, like for instance, Winifred Hodge Rose, will mush the hammer and the leaker together. The leaker literally means body or corpse. And it's where we get the term lich from, if you play D&D or Pathfinder. So with that understanding, the leaker is the body, and that is a soul. The hammer, the second skin, the spiritual self, is a soul. The breath that you take is a spiritual force, as well as closest approximation is like ghost. So there's a lot of different souls that you can like look at to your physical body or emanations from your physical body. Like the munir is tied, your mind is tied into the soul as well through your thoughts and your memories. So you got your huger, which is your like emotional and logical part of your mind, and then you've got the mooner, which is like memory. And I am being incredibly broad here. If you want a really excellent deep dive, get Winifred Hodge Rose's 2 Heathen Soul Lore books. I won't agree with everything in them. Like, she mushes together the Leaker and the Hammer, which is the body and the second skin. But despite my nitpicking and disagreements on certain interpretations, it's an excellent resource.
I wouldn't call that nitpicking, though. I think you do yourself a disservice when you say nitpicking. I think that having legitimate disagreements with someone on something, especially so undefined as the nature of the soul, I think that's very legitimate.
Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah. And how does that? So in your understanding, in your system, how you practice, how many parts are there in the soul?
It depends. So, I mean, this is the fun thing about learning about the soul from different perspectives is sometimes you reevaluate how many parts there are. Mm-hmm. So when I originally started looking at the multipartite soul, the model that I had was a 17-part soul from Raven Caldera. I have since refined this, and I usually see about 15. So you've got, your physical body, your Leaker, your Hammer, which is your second skin, your On, which is your breath, your Mother, your mood, but it's your emotional state. It's also your bravery, your courage. It is your Hugger, which is your ability to think and act and do. It is your Mooner, which is your memory. It is your Hamingya, which is the luck that you build in community. It is your Megan, which is your personal power and also your personal luck. Luck in this case, if you go look at our previous episodes where we cover luck, is not the same thing as rolling the dice and getting 6s all the time. It can be, but it's not just that.
Yeah, it's much more complicated.
Much more complicated. Then you've got, let me think, your Vili and your Ve, which your Vili is your will, the Ve is your sense of the sacred. Then you've got your Le, or your blooming hue, your Liti, which is like your vivacity. And then there's La, which is the blood in your veins and the heat of your body, that kind of thing. The last couple that I have referenced are direct gifts that are named in the Havamal as given by Othin, Lothar, and Honir, or Othin, Vili, and Ve, the 3 brothers that formed Mythgarth and various other worlds. To cap this all off, I also understand that Earther, or Weird, as most people will say it, the cosmos fabric, or the carving of reality that unites us all, is one of the souls that we share with other people. And then you've got Orlog, which is your personal thread of Earther, which was set down before you were born. This is your physical circumstances, your emotional, mental, spiritual. This is the wiring you're born with. So yeah. I probably skipped a couple, and I apologize. So if I think of them later, I will let you know. But that's what I can think off the top of my head.
No, that's good. And that's important because it ties into a thing that I wanted to kind of bounce off of, which is at least my understanding. And I primarily do not work with a Heathen Soul Matrix anymore. I primarily am working with a Pack Soul Matrix. But
I'm shocked.
Yeah, right. Shocking. We'll get into that in a minute. But like in when I was working primarily with the Heathen Soul Matrix, one of the things that really stood out to me was the fact that multiple of the soul parts are not things that are inherent just to you. They are things shared in community. Hamingya, Orlog, Weird, these are all things that are legitimately part of your soul that are also not just you, right? They're community, at least partly community.
Well, yeah, like you cannot develop Hamingya alone. You cannot develop Orlog or Earther alone.
Yeah, and these aren't things that, even if you're physically alone, quote unquote, like I'm in my house alone, I'm not alone. There are gods and spirits all around me, right? The couch I'm sitting on in an animistic world is a spirit. The computer that I'm talking on, the internet that is transmitting it, all of these things are spirits. Even when you're alone, you're never alone.
Right.
You've also got literally in your veins your ancestors, right? Like, there's no such thing as being alone. And so there's a very real you're not just you are you in context. And that also ties into also like my understandings of how,
look out, they're right behind you. Right. Yeah, pretty much. It's not just that you're you in context, you're you through relationship.
Yes, exactly.
For me, that's the key to all of this.
Absolutely. And that really also ties into a lot of other like non-theistic understandings of how like we as humans function.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like gender is a performance. Like it's socially constructed, but it's still inherent to me. Like these things are not mutually exclusive. My
Right.
gender is inherent to me, but it's also socially constructed. It's dependent on the society that I'm in. If I were in a different kind of society, I would have a different gender identity.
And likewise, sexuality.
Yep.
You know, people like, oh, well, sexuality is either you're male or female. It's like, nah, dog, it's a spectrum. it's spectrums all the way down.
And it's in context all the way down, which is a lot of why this is important, right? Like you can't be in isolation, and it really takes it away from a thing that happens, I find a lot with pagan theology, pagan practices, etc., is that they become just reactions to Christianity. And right, so a lot of people will come into heathenry, etc., looking for like 10 commandments and what's the Bible and etc. And so they get to the soul and they're like, okay, well, the Christians think we have this soul. Well, what's our soul look like? And they're thinking that it's just a one-to-one translation. And the fact is that it doesn't work that way. In Christianity, at least evangelical Christianity that I grew up with, your soul is the thing inherent to you, and that's it, right? Like it's
Right.
very siloed off, and it's very individual.
It's almost a hallmark of evangelical Christianity.
Yeah,
that it's exclusively so.
Yeah, and you know so you get to thinking about theology and the soul in heathenry as an example, and suddenly, no, it's not like we're trying to translate concepts. It's a completely different worldview. You're not you as an individual. You are you in context, and necessarily so, right? Even if you don't like it, you don't have to like everything about it. Like a big part of my orlog is that I was born to a family with a history of alcoholism. That affects everything from my actual DNA up to how I was raised. Like that's part of my orlog. There's nothing I can do about that. I can change how I do things going forward. I can change my weird with that, but I can't change my orlog. It's still part of it. That's still part of it.
Can you change your fate? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to our Irish listeners, watchers, whatever. I couldn't help myself. I had to throw the Brave reference in.
But yeah. And I think that's really important.
I think if Merida had an actual understanding of how fate works, she would understand that's a hard no, even in a non-deterministic model, because what she's asking is, can I change the circumstances that led me here? She's not actually asking, how do I fix the future?
Yeah. Scottish, not Irish.
Oh, God damn it. See?
It's fine.
I'm an American, and I've been drinking. I don't know what to tell you.
So L says, I wonder if this is part of why a lot of Westerners think the idea of ghosts is stupid. The idea that your whole soul remains behind seems a lot harder to swallow than leaving a part of it behind. I think that's a big part of it. I think part of it too is just the kind of rejection of esotericism by large swaths of Christianity as a means of control.
Yeah, because I mean, if I can't have a mystical experience, I can't challenge the pastor.
Exactly. But I think it's both. Yeah, like if you're looking at a earlier Catholic theology where you have the soul and maybe the spiritus, and then the body, and the body is not considered divine. It's a thing that goes back into the dirt. The spiritus is, if I'm remembering correctly, generally considered to have dissipated after death. Correct. And then you've got the soul that goes up to heaven or to purgatory.
One part is that the soul is not the thing that comes back as a ghost. In old Catholic theology, it's the spiritus.
Really? Okay, that's interesting.
Because the soul is the basically the driver, right?
Yeah.
But it is the immutable, immortal thing that is affected by your choices on earth. The spiritus is the outlying breath, because it's what it means. And spiritus is linked to breath. So that thing that you exhale on death, and that occasionally corpses will breathe, right. So they appear to still be alive. Which is why you occasionally get beheadings and all kinds of interesting shit in old Catholic graves because they're like, oh, that fucker's still breathing. Put a stake through it.
Right. But yeah, no, I think that plays a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. So in Catholic theology, yes, that is absolutely correct. The body needed to be whole, unless, of course, you had a revenant. In which case, dissect the shit out of that body and make sure it can't come back. In some cases, there were, for suspected witches, they would put like iron bars over their graves so they couldn't get up. So yeah, the body was important to Catholic theology, and it's also important to heathen theology, I think, insofar as the disposition of the body is becoming an active point of contention for a lot of heathens. A lot of heathens are looking toward green burial. A lot of them are looking toward methods, whether it's aquamation or whether it's being buried with the seeds of, or not the seeds, but the root ball burial method, which has become a more viable option here in Michigan. So, yes, in Catholic theology, to boil that down, yes, the body was important as a flesh vehicle, and it needed to be unspoiled in the ground.
Which also gets into, L says, goals for the Catholic Church to be so freaked out by me, they want to put bars over my grave. Yeah, no, that's pretty much. But yeah, so, nature of the soul is complicated. And it also, one thing that is important to talk about is that the nature of the soul has broader implications for the theology of the entire system you're working in, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Like the very communal aspects to a lot of portions of the soul in heathenry talk to the broader theology of heathenry, right?
Correct.
Like, Orlog is important, weird is important because those are important theological concepts. These they affect not just you, but everything around you, both on an individual level and on a community level.
I love you, Jesse.
Josie says, so that would make you barred from heaven? Question mark. It's fine.
Love it. But it does. It has a push and a pull effect on the theology, because if I can affect how future Earther works, that means that even if I don't have the same magnitude of power as a god, I still have power, and it still has an excellent explanation for why magic and other forms of spirit work and esoteric work have the effects they do. Why can we manifest physical effects? Because we're pulling on the strings of how the fabric of reality works.
Exactly. And in a different, like, same topic, but in a very different way, with and this is very much an area of active exploration that has not been well defined. I'm working on it. Me and many others are working on it very actively. The thing with Pack Soul Matrix is that the Pack Soul Matrix is the same as the main Pack Spirits. There are basically 7 soul parts. There is Earth, Silence, Howl, Sky, Hunt, Prey, Pack. These are your soul parts and are the primary gods of the system, right? It's a very to use kind of a parallel example. One of the things said very often about heathen offering rituals is, and about heathen this gets into other theology, but like heathen homes are microcosms of the macro universe, right?
Correct.
So at the time of offering, the flame or whatever symbol you have for the world tree becomes, in a very theological and real sense, the Axis Mundi, right? That little candle is the center of the universe. Cool. In a very similar way, in Pack theology, each individual is a living reflection and manifestation of the universe at whole.
Each pack member reflects the pack, as it were.
Yes, exactly. And vice versa, right? The pack reflects each member, all the way up and all the way down, which has a lot of really wild implications across the board, but also in terms of, and I'm touching on this briefly because of a question we got from a listener of if we've got time to talk about morals and ethics and how it affects our theology, which we're going to save that for the end, I think. But there's some serious implications there, right? Like if every person you meet is a reflection of the universe as whole, maybe treat them that way.
Right.
And
some of those reflections are going to be incongruous with who you are and what you are and where you are. Right. Just because I think a white supremacist has the capacity to reflect the cosmos doesn't mean that those parts of the cosmos have my best intention in mind.
Oh, absolutely. This is not to say you have to get along with everyone, but there is kind of an underlying respect for the potential, if not the actualization. If that
Sure. I mean, this is also where the importance of a more immanent theology is important, because I get to judge you by how you act, not what you think, not what you feel. I get to judge you by how you act. If you are an asshole to me, guess what? That label is something that you've earned. It's not something that's inherently thrust upon you like original sin is.
Exactly.
Original sin is basically an unearned black mark on your soul before you're even able to consciously live.
Yeah.
So I consider, if there is such a thing as blasphemy, I think original sin at this point is probably a very blasphemous understanding of the soul matrix or the solar system.
Yeah.
Simply because you are pre-fucked before you do anything else. No choices are made. You're pre-fucked.
Yep. Question then. And I'm asking this because this plays a significant portion. So another big concept in Pack Soul Matrix, as I understand it, is reincarnation. This plays a major role, right? So one, how does that affect past lives and past life debt, and also ancestral debt in your understanding?
Okay. The reason I will gripe and bitch and moan about original sin is that it is a black mark on your soul that has to be wiped away by an oath. That bugs the shit out of me for a lot of reasons. So karmic debt, reincarnation issues, things like that. If this is part of your autolog that is not part of your current incarnation's issues, you may have to deal with the repercussions, but it's not your fault. And that, I think, is a big fucking difference between your current incarnation's basic is not a tabula rasa, but it's also not at fault per se. Sarenth might have did do some heinous shit lifetimes ago. And the work that I do in this lifetime is for this lifetime. And if I happen to work that scold off, that debt or obligation off, great. But I think people get really hung up on the blame game and the fault and the guilt to the point of I don't do anything. Or I actually cut myself off with my legs from being able to walk. I think that over worry is actually a problem because it slows the usefulness of living this life now.
So a difference between responsibility and fault.
Yes. And that to me is the fucking world of difference. Fault is blame. It's you did wrong. It is not taking responsibility. Okay. If I'm at fault, I'm just saying, hey, I fucked up. Yep. If I'm taking responsibility, that means I am doing what it is within my power to correct an imbalance or correct a wrong.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference. And I also have to be of the age of the ability to make that choice to do that work.
And I very much agree with you. And this plays into a lot of like social justice concepts as well, right? Like Maleck never had anything to do with racial segregation or slavery in the United States. But we can all see the color of my skin. I am very much white. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. I am very much white. Not everyone can see. Sorry, that was not okay. Anyway, I am very much white. It is still my responsibility to do what I can to, which isn't all that much, but it is still within my power to do something to redress what I can about the racial inequity in the United States.
The issue of racial inequality, of ableism, of pretty much any ist or ism that you could look at as an issue in today's society may not be my fault, but I have a responsibility to fuck up, overturn, or affect the paradigms that continue the process of the isms and the ists that victimize other people, especially if they are based on my white skin.
Exactly.
Because fault makes you into a basically, oh, this isn't something, I'm at fault, oh no. Like, nah, just do your part.
Yeah. Just
take yourself out of the equation, do what you got to do.
Yeah. And that's why you get into a lot of like white guilt. Oh no, no, dude, nobody's saying you're bad. Nobody fucking cares. Like, let's just get the work done.
And it's not even necessarily about your ancestors. Like, my Dutch ancestors came over in the late 1800s, or excuse me, early 1900s. They came over when Germany was bombing the shore. My ancestors from that part of the bloodline had nothing to do with slavery, had nothing to do with anything. It doesn't fucking matter, because their white skin meant that when my great-grandfather got sponsored in, he had no issues.
Yep. He still benefited from the system, and you and I and our parents benefited from the system.
Absolutely.
So, you know.
Absolutely. So anyway, a lot of these soul lessons tie into how we live this life, where we live this life, and in what fashion. And you can take lessons from your past, literally as this incarnation, or figuratively from past lives. Take those lessons, but don't use them to beat yourself up with, because none of us have time for that shit.
Yeah, like, it's quite on top of like the emotional damage you're doing to yourself for no reason. It's also like, what purpose does it serve? Like, does it help people? No.
If you're going to make a blood offering, at least stomp some Nazi punk's face in the dirt while you're doing it.
Right? Like, don't just cut yourself. At least get cut doing it.
Right. Yeah. So I think this actually ties in actually quite well to esotericism as a general idea, right?
Yeah, go for it.
So esotericism, I'm just going to like spitball the first definition that pops up on Google as a way to segue in. Yeah. Not define Google. God damn it, Google.
Yeah.
So esoteric is defined as intended for or understood by only a small group, especially one with specialized knowledge or interest, related to or being a small group with specialized knowledge or interest, not known for suitable for the public. That's not really what we're talking about. What we're usually talking about is something that, at least in modern heathen, pagan, occult circles, when we're talking about something that's esoteric versus exoteric is the hidden shit. It's the stuff that happens behind closed doors or when you're in ritual and you're not in public. This can be anything from magic to personal spiritual revelation. Exoteric is usually stuff like public bloats, public rituals, things like that. Excuse me. So what esoteric versus exoteric? Exoteric is the stuff that we do public facing. Esoteric is the stuff that we do facing inward. It's the stuff that's hidden.
That's definitely, yeah. I would quibble a bit. I would say
please do.
Esoteric is the stuff that everyone in a given religious system does. Like, this is, at least people who are of age will do this, right? So in heathenry, like,
you mean exoteric?
Exoteric, yeah. Sorry, did I say esoteric?
You did.
Sorry. Exoteric is the stuff that everyone does, right?
Yeah. Oh, no, I'll agree with that as well. I'll agree with that. That's not a quibble. I agree with that.
And then esoteric is the hidden, and that's the shit that you don't have to do this. And I will make this a flat argument. It does not make you morally or religiously superior to do this.
Agreed.
And I will say that as a flat statement, as someone who delves heavily in the esoteric. Like, you don't fucking need to do what I do. You're not a better pagan.
Not a fucking requirement. You can be perfectly happy just doing a prayer and an offering every single day, and you're just as heathen, just as pagan, just as good as I am. Yep.
But esoteric is the hidden stuff. It's the specialized skills, right? Like, I always like to use medical stuff because it is relatively easy, right? Like, everyone can put on a Band-Aid. Everyone can call 911. People with some training, a little bit of esoteric training, can do first aid and CPR. people with even more training can be, EMS services, emergency medical services, and paramedics. Even more training, you can be nurses or medical tech staff or etc. And then, at the higher end of esoteric training, you've got doctors and surgeons and etc.
Mm-hmm.
And a doctor is not morally better than the janitor that they're treating. They just have different skill sets.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't want to watch a doctor try to do a janitor's job.
No.
Having done so, it's ugly.
Yeah.
This is actually a really excellent question. I want us to dig into this. What's the difference between esoteric and occult to you then? I will say that my understanding of occult per se versus what most people think when they think of the occult has definitely changed over time because of how long I've been in the communities.
Yeah.
Do you mind me tackling this real quick?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So esoteric is the shit that is accessible to anybody, but it's a personal revelation, a personal experience, a personal ritual, or it's a group ritual. Like if you're in, say, an oathed Wiccan coven, a lot of your rituals are going to be esoteric because they're not public facing.
Yeah.
Occult means hidden. Esoteric means the stuff that the public, generally speaking, doesn't do. So exoteric is the general requirements for you to be part of a religion. All right. When I say it's the public facing part of the religion, it's the part that people can say, that's what a heathen does. Okay. Now, granted, they think that everybody does rune casting and not everybody who's a heathen does rune casting. So take that with your mileage may vary. The difference to me between esoteric and occult is the occult is a mishmash of very often confused ideologies and ideas. The occult used to be unified around general ideas based in principles founded either from theosophy, anthroposophy, or ideas and systems cribbed from ceremonial magic, which were cribbed from Kabbalah and Christian mysticism, smushed together into systems trying to explain the cosmos in a way that was different from the church. The roots of occultism in society in general are fucking weird. And the fun part is that the occult plays into not only the more, what most people will call high magic, but also the low magic stuff like hoodoo, voodoo, that kind of thing. Well, let me back that up. Voodoo is not a magic system. Voodoo is a religion. Hoodoo, however, hoodoo, rootwork, and similar systems like Brahcharai, low magic systems, are occult. They are forms of acquiring, retaining, and using power. To me, the difference between esoteric is I might do a bunch of esoteric work of connecting with a god, but I might not even be seeking power. Mm-hmm. But the occult, generally speaking, seeks power to do something. Whether it's to turn invisible, if you want to look at the old grimoires, or child, I swear to gods. Excuse me. Sorry. So what really marks the difference is a difference of culture, religious focus, and what the purpose of the magic or esoteric work is aimed towards. But the occult in general, as I understand it, has distinct cultural markers that esoteric practices within religions don't.
That's fair. And I was going to basically just say a much less well thought out version of what you were going to say, which was, to me, they mean roughly the same thing, except that occult has connotations.
Occult is spooky.
Well, I would say for me, occult has connotations of like ceremonial magic shit and
like
and demonolatry, but like mine is not nearly well thought out. Like, no, I think you did a good job of.
Thank you. I mean, and like. Again, I used to be an occultist, basically. So, coming out of Catholic Christianity.
Definitionally, these words have roughly the same meaning, but connotationally, they have very different meanings, and that's important.
Fuck yeah. Like, if you're thinking sacred geometry, you're not generally speaking thinking heathenry. You're thinking occultism. Mm-hmm. If you're thinking, I need to have a triangle of art, you're not thinking heathenry. You're thinking occultism.
Generally speaking.
And I think occult versus esoteric is specifically also in relationship to Christianity.
Yeah.
Because what the fuck are we hiding from? We're not actually hiding. The point of a lot of these ceremonial practices is they were hiding in plain sight.
Yeah. Or they were hiding behind closed doors and no one could say anything about it because of their reputation.
Who was gonna bitch talk the bishop about his little magic forays into talking with demons? Right. Fucking nobody. That's who.
Yeah. So diving into that, how does esotericism work for you in heathenry? Like, theologically speaking.
Fucking touches everything. Like, I'm to the point where I don't even, like, after a certain point, I don't bother with source material. Mm-hmm. Because I am so deep in the fucking weeds, I know that the source material is going to be of no use. And I don't mean that to denigrate the source material, but there's a point at which the map clearly fucking ends, and you have to be brave enough to step beyond it. Mm-hmm. The esoteric touches my entire life. It infuses everything I do. The fact that we're sitting here doing this show is actually because the power of alcohol is something that I think is, on the one hand, much maligned with great reason, but also deeply misunderstood, because I look at alcohol as an entheogen that can be abused. No different than cocaine, no different than LSD, no different than mushrooms, no different than cocoa. I look at Three Pagans on Tap as a manifestation of putting the stuff into my mouth so that my brain loosens up enough that the words can flow better. Not that I really need an excuse for diarrhea of the mouth, but in some cases, the alcohol plays an inspirational and spiritual effect. And I think that the way that esotericism plays into my life, I can't look into a corner of my life anymore and not see my life touched by it.
Well,
I mean, I'm literally wearing runes on my skin. So
what does that mean theologically, though?
So theologically, when your life is lived through esoteric lens, that means that to a certain degree, you are trusting that your relationships and your understanding of them are real. That your, for whatever modifier real is as a placeholder. Mm-hmm. The alcohol's starting to hit, so like I'm starting to like really feel as we're talking this. So like the esoteric quality of my life is infused in everything that I look at. Like the fact that I see spirits in the screen that I'm communicating with as a proxy for you is actually esoteric, because I am not talking to Maleck, who is sitting in front of me. I am talking to the motherfucker who is seeing my image through the screen, through the wires, through the electrons, that is being assisted by a whole host of fire, earth, air, water spirits, etc. That esoteric understanding could break little me's brain when I was like a rigid devotional Catholic. And now it's just a matter of course. So esotericism isn't odd. It's just not a world that I share with everybody, because not everybody has the same understanding. Does that make sense? Like I share this world with everybody, but my understanding of it is enhanced by the relationships that I hold, by the understanding that I bring to my everyday reality.
Gotcha. And you consider those relationships to be inherently esoteric because they are so personal and self-revelatory and not a thing that can be shared.
I wouldn't say they can't be shared, because I have an entire fucking blog where I don't do anything but share that shit. I think that my immediate experience of the thing, I then filter into the blog.
There you go.
I distill my experiences like a good spirit, if you will. Pardon the pun. So speaking of Quiet Man, you know, this blended Irish whiskey is only made in Ireland. It's a blended whiskey, right? So it's got all these different moving parts that make the blended Irish whiskey a Quiet Man versus Kirkland. I cannot make this into a Kirkland. If I mix the two, it's a mixed drink. I do not distill the essence of A Quiet Man into the Kirkland because, well, it's not the same fucking process. Likewise, I cannot distill my process into you. You cannot distill your process into me. What we can do is we can share, we can come to an understanding, but you will never be me, I will never be you. Not because we don't share inherent qualities, but because our experiences, even of the same thing, of the same moment, are different.
So, in your reckoning, then everyone who is practicing their religion is in some sense an esotericist, because whatever practice they have, even if it's small and quiet, to use certain qualifiers, which are not derogatory, these are just qualifiers.
Right. I would say no as an immediate response to that. And here's why. I know plenty of people who have a purely exoteric practice who do not have revelatory experiences of heathen gods, who are not esoteric. What they do is they take that understanding of why they live their life the way they do from the ethics of their religion and they apply it to their life.
Okay.
I think it is perfectly valid. And I think, honestly, most people live their lives in this exoteric manner, not esoteric, because what they're not doing is applying the knowledge and experiences, if they have any. Some people just don't have experiences of the gods, and they are just as heathen as I am.
Okay.
So if they can't apply that experience, that doesn't mean that they're not a valid heathen. It just means that they're not experiencing the esoteric.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so. I'm a little buzzed, and also I run in much the same circles as you, so I think it makes sense.
It's hard to contemplate this outside of having had the experiences we did.
Yeah, no, absolutely. As someone who is, in many senses, even deeper into esotericism than you are, which is fucking wild to say.
Right. I didn't marry a goddess, so, there you go.
Yeah, so we didn't talk about this yet, but yeah.
Well, I apologize. I did not mean
to. You're fine. Not a problem. We didn't do a catch up at the beginning of the episode, but was it this past Wednesday?
Was it?
Fucking
no, it was 2 Wednesdays ago.
2 Wednesdays ago. I don't know.
Because I went back to work.
Yeah. June 21st. Yes, yeah. June 21st. I'm good at things. I'm really good at time. You can tell because I have ADHD.
This is why you mark shit on the calendar.
June 21st at solar noon on the summer solstice, because Freyr and Freya were very insistent. I'm not saying it wasn't with good reason. I'm not saying it wasn't important. I'm saying you were insistent. We're very insistent about the time. I did a Angerboth and I got married. It's God spousing ceremony. If anyone has questions about God spousing stuff, I am obviously extremely new, and also kind of not, because it's been approaching for over a year now. Mm-hmm. But also I'm not super plugged into the God spouse community, which is also a very, very small community and very fractured, because it's a very esoteric part of primarily pagan religions, although not just pagan religions, because nuns exist. Catholic nuns exist.
Yeah.
But
without getting too far into the weeds. Yeah.
Freyr and Freya insistent? Never. Just all the time. To be completely fair, my experience was that Freyr was, this is a good idea. And Freya was like, you will do this, or there will be hell to pay. And by hell to pay, I mean, you will pay me. And I said, I do not want to acquire that debt. I will just get married at the time you say.
Yes, ma'am. Probably the smartest thing you could have said to Freya.
Yeah. It was a very good. Yeah. It was a very good, very moving, very genuinely fun experience. I did not fall over. I did not fall over twice.
We had catchers.
I genuinely didn't fall over. I just almost fell over. It's fine.
I think, with that understanding, how did that change your understanding of what esoteric is? Or how did it reify things for you?
I wouldn't say it changed my understanding of esotericism, I would say it reified things. I would say that my understanding of esotericism is pretty similar to yours. And I think I covered this earlier, but it's worth kind of approaching again. Esotericism is the deeply personal and hidden things. It is the things that are not required, but may, for some people, add to the religious experience.
Mm-hmm.
It is the things that, and when we're getting into that, it's not. So the things that are exoteric, I should also say, esoteric and specialized are different things for me.
Yes, fucking yes.
Because like a priest could do an exoteric ritual that is still specialized, that only the priest can do, but it's still exoteric. Correct. It is not hidden. It is a normal, open, front-facing, to use your terminology, part of the religion. The priesthood itself might be esoteric. It might be a thing that not everyone can do because it might be initiatory. May or may not, like you, for instance, have the Quakers who abolished the laity and everyone is a priest.
I actually was thinking of the Konkyo Shinto priest that we just had on AGF.
Yeah.
Whose practice is extremely exoteric.
Yeah,
but is initiated.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. And this is not me trying to speak for Shinto. This is just an outsider.
No, I'm using an example of somebody I fucking interviewed.
Yeah, right. And like, if someone came in and said that isn't a correct understanding, I would say absolutely.
Okay,
please tell me more. I would like to learn. But like, I just want to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it was at once an esoteric and exoteric ceremony, I think. My experience was esoteric. I cannot put into words, I cannot explain, and I would not try to because it isn't fucking anyone else's business.
Right.
What I experienced when I was saying my vows, when the binding happened. In a heathen sense, what happened is that, and it's a bit complicated because my understanding is that this is not the first lifetime that Angerboth and I have been together.
Sure.
I also understand spirits having distinct lifetimes, so that gets a little bit complicated too.
Sure.
Like I understand myself as having had multiple past lives that were non-physical, that were purely spirit.
Right. Which, from a heathen soul matrix perspective, doesn't actually not make sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So like,
incidentally, I call her stage mom for a reason regarding Freya.
Yeah, for Freya. Yeah.
Once you're used to almost falling over a lot, you get very good at not falling over. I appreciate that, El.
Very, very legit.
A little about the bear that tracks. Yeah, same.
Yeah. So like, my experience is not something that I can or would share publicly because, one, it's nobody else's fucking
Nor should you. Nor should you have to.
Right. Nor should
if you feel called to share that, that's a gift, right?
Exactly. But at the same time, there were multiple people who, and this is an interesting, if someone were to tell me they would consider this esoteric, I would believe them. I don't, but I would understand where they're coming from. The guests at the wedding witnessed the oaths made. Capital W witnessed, right? There was an aspect.
And there was a spiritual tie to witnessing an oath.
Exactly. I would call that exoteric. I would call that.
I would agree.
Part of.
Because it's an accepted part of heathen and most pagan religions.
Yes.
As a matter of course, if you witness an oath, you're responsible for it.
Yes. If someone were to tell me they consider that exoteric, I wouldn't necessarily agree, but I could at least see where they're coming from.
You mean esoteric?
Esoteric, yes. Thank you. So, like, in a very real sense, this ceremony was both esoteric and exoteric, right? There was also multiple esoteric practices. There was something that's pretty close to a approaching possessory work for a couple of people. Sarenth officiated, and there was some quasi-possessory stuff going on.
There's some interesting shit going on. Freya and I were in dialogue in my body. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
That's probably the easiest way to break that down.
Yeah.
Fenris made an appearance through our drummer. That was cool.
Yeah, that was very cool. That was much more strictly possessory, at least how I would define possessory.
Right.
Which was not expected, but...
Not unexpected!
I didn't expect it, but like it's...
I fully expected him to show.
Like I certainly expected the appearance. I did not expect the drumming experience, I should say. And also the Sacred Fire was strictly esoteric. That was a pack fire, which involves initiate-only knowledge. I can't even talk about that on air. Like,
all right, so let's not.
Yeah, no, like
moving swiftly on.
Yeah, like I can talk about the fact that like I can't talk about the requirements for it. Why? Because it's initiate-only knowledge. You don't get to know.
Fucking weird. It's esoteric, and some of that shit is not for you.
Yep. Give me half a second. I'm going to turn on light because I'm getting a little dark.
No, go for it.
You ramble.
That's esoteric knowledge. We don't apply that here. I can't open this bitch. I am sad. But I probably shouldn't mix my backwards bastards with all the liquor I've been having. So we're just going to put that back.
They recently changed the bottle art for that, and it like threw me for a loop in the store. I was like, what the hell?
I got the old one.
Oh, you've got the old one?
Yeah,
you've got the backwoods bastard. Sorry, I thought you said dirty bastard. They changed the art to dirty bastard.
No. Well, I've got backwards bastard, and now that I can't open the fucking bottle, I'm like, you know what? That's probably a mercy for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with regard to esotericism, go ahead.
How would you differentiate then esotericism and magic?
I don't. I mean, just to be like perfectly bluntly honest, like generally speaking, at least for heathenry, like this is where context fucking matters. Like, if you're a Wiccan or you're a heathen, generally speaking, well, there's different approaches to magic, right? Mm-hmm. So within Wiccan circles, the magic is kind of part of your everyday, but not all the magic you do is exoteric. Actually, if you're a Wiccan, most of the magic you do is supposed to be esoteric. If you're a heathen, generally speaking, magic is esoteric. Generally speaking, I would say magic is on the esoteric end of the spectrum versus exoteric, because even when you're doing stuff like rune carving, that is still an esoteric practice being put into the context of an exoteric ritual. If you're doing an exoteric like offering ritual, and you're dedicating this to Odin, and you're carving runes, that's an aspect of the esoteric blending into the exo. Like I very much look at magic as esoteric because it's personal, it's specialized, it's relational, it's often personal and individualized. Even for those of us who study the exact same rune poems the exact same way and do the exact same Galdr each and every time, we will still have individualized relationships with the runes. I understand them and work with them as Vaitia, as spirits. Most people understand them as a writing system, and maybe there's some magical shit going on there. I, on the other hand, look at this as 24 individual spirits that I've cultivated a relationship that I've literally carved into my skin. So, you know, my mileage is going to vary from somebody who just looks at them as a writing system that's really neat.
Yeah. So how does, in your cosmology, how does magic function? Like what does magic do?
I would say, functionally speaking, magic is the application of Vili, of will, Megan, power or might or main, and it is driven towards a certain goal. Whether or not it makes its way to that goal is beside the point. Okay. The point is that you are trying to exercise power toward an end. Okay. Magic is the working with or use of power in various aspects. And I'm just using the word power as a placeholder. You could put spirit in there, spirit parts. You could put Megan in there because power is a big fucking placeholder with the way that I'm using it. Sure. If I say Megan, I am talking about personal power. If I say Haminya, I am talking about group luck. So you can work with magic and these different soul parts to achieve an end. And in my experience, the more soul parts you include in a magical working, the more effect it's going to have because it's more of you.
And you're using that to tug on the threads of weird to create an effect.
Or I'm going to use the opposite metaphor, because there's two metaphors that go with earther or weird. You are either weaving or you're carving.
Mm-hmm.
I like the carving one better, and here's why. I can tug a thread and undo the whole goddamn thing. I've watched my wife do it with all of her crochet works at some point. She'll be halfway through her project and go, I screwed up the pattern somewhere like 20 steps ago. Unrolls. I like carving better. It's also more dangerous as a metaphor because you can't undo that shit. Because once you scratch the rune in, that's it. Unless you sand the edge down, you're going to have a hard time taking the carving off, right? Mm-hmm. You have to be extremely deliberate and careful when you're carving. Weaving allows you some serious wiggle room because you can undo that shit. Carving is like, all right, I'm putting this knife in. That's it. That's fair. And again, I'm kind of being bombastic and all that with my metaphors here, but you kind of get where I'm coming from, right?
For sure.
So, like, for me, fuck, I lost the plot.
Magic, how does it function?
So magic operates on a lot of different levels, right? So you have to physically be capable of doing magic. And what I mean is anybody can physically do magic in terms of I can concentrate on a thing and willpower to make things happen. But if I want to carve, I have to be able to physically carve. Mm-hmm. If I want to go out into the forest and breathe on a tree and take in its power, I have to be able to walk up to the tree and go... Okay, if I've got a breathing difficulty, I maybe shouldn't be fucking around with trees that are going to shoot pollen into my nose, right? So I need to for one, it's easier to notice. Yes. Oh, that's a really fucking good point. Thank you, Josie.
Josie says, counterpoint, when you carve something, it's easier to notice. It's much easier to hide something with weaving. And I think this is... And metaphors always fail in the end, but I think this is a case where two metaphors can highlight different things about the thing that they are...
Absolutely different approaches.
Right? If you're trying to be a bit more subtle with your magic, maybe use a weaving metaphor. If you're trying to be a bit more permanent with your magic, maybe use a carving metaphor. And these are metaphors, not... Right, these are the map, not the territory.
So like when you're actually like going out into nature and you're asking a spirit for a help, right? You have to physically go out into nature. You have to interact with the spirit on some level, even if it's exoteric ritual of offering, right? Mm-hmm. An exoteric ritual of offering might be no more than, hail tree, thank you for this gift of bark. Pour out the offering. That's an exoteric ritual. It's very simple. The esoteric part is when you take that piece of bark and then you carve runes into it, or you put your saliva on it, or you put in a spell jar or something. The exoteric becomes esoteric the moment that you start really doing the hidden shit that makes stuff happen. Now, exoteric can make stuff move just fine on its own. What you're oftentimes doing is you're asking other people to move shit on the board for you. Mm-hmm. Or you're asking them in a very public-facing way, I want this X or Y. Mm-hmm. A symbol is an excellent example of an exoteric ritual that you might be inviting people to witness an oath that you're saying, hey, I oath to do X or Y. Mm-hmm. I need you all to help me. Can we make this happen?
It's also worth noting that a lot of the... I'm purely pointing this out because it popped into my brain. It's worth noting that a lot of the examples of oaths that we have from saga literature are actually, I swear that this thing did happen. They're effectively boasts with
about the
past, right? They're boasts with like reputation on the line,
right?
And more than just reputation on the line, right? They're saying, I swear that this thing happened. Look at me and how cool I am.
Right.
Which that makes a lot more sense in that socio-political context, right, where that kind of thing mattered more because it established your reputation and things like that.
Right.
And that matters a lot less now, where we tend to think of oaths as things we will do in the future.
Right. So it's also a matter of perspective on time itself,
Mm-hmm.
because we can't say how the future is going to go, but we can say, this is what I'm going to do. So a lot of your oaths that aren't about I did this are about I will do this. Not I will succeed, not I'm definitely going to blah. I will not cut my hair until I've conquered all of Norway, for instance. Hot old fair hair.
Yep.
So the examples we have of esoteric are often exoteric in their layout, but not esoteric in the niceties of how they get done, right?
Yeah.
So where I understand magic playing into the esoteric is that, for me, magic is a thing that you do. Magic is the spiritual working of deeds. If you really want to like boil it down, like if you want to distill it into a definition, magic is the application of power and will to see something done. And it is done to achieve an end. The point of magic is to get shit done. Not to be nice, not to be gentle. It can be, but it isn't always.
Sure, blessings can be great, and curses are still magic.
And the thing is, like, blessings are often exoteric, right? I ask a god to bless an object. I ask a god to hallow this Fritz day. I'm saying as an example, I'm not actually doing ritual. So, if I am exoterically asking for this blessing, I am doing this front facing in the public. I am not doing anything behind the scenes. I am not blah, 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 blah. If I carve a rune into something, I am summoning power into this object. I am enlivening this object with the rune. Somewhat literally. Especially because I have a spiritual perspective that this rune is alive. Okay. Let's say I'm developing a charm for protection while I travel. We'll say it's Algies and Rytho. That's a real simple one.
Yeah.
Algies looks like a tree. Rytho looks like an R for those who are just listening at home. So I carve this thing. I say, hail Algies, hail Rytho. Thank you for protection on my travel. That means that I have programmed this thing to protect me during my travel. And that is basically the sum total of what this thing should do. Now, how it does it, if I haven't programmed, if I haven't said, hey, don't kill people, and somebody hijacks a train, say I'm on a train and somebody hijacks it, maybe the person accidentally gets sucked out a window or something. I don't fucking know. That'd be really fucking cool. And I look at this charm and like, I'm never taking it off. But, absent of movie woo bullshit, a lot of what these things do is they tug and they pull and they carve into the earther fabric. The thing that connects us all, the thing that unites us all, the thing that we're all simultaneously pulling and pushing and being pulled and pushed by.
Yep. And
sometimes what matters in magic isn't that you're pulling or you're pushing, it's where. Not because you inherently have more power than a god or more power than a senator. It merely means that you have found this one trigger point that this person didn't protect.
Yep.
So I know that's a very, very roundabout way of answering your question, but I think boiled down, I think magic is part of esotericism, and esoteric work isn't all magic.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's a good and important distinction, right? Like, not everything that's esoteric is magic. Magic is a subset of esotericism for the most part, or at least in most cases.
Thanks, Al.
Charm. It's super effective. Yeah, it's funny. And magic is the application of power to affect fate, roughly.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's yeah.
Quiet man.
Yeah, I have.
So You go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say I have to go to bed soon, but I am considering grabbing another drink, but we'll see.
So I actually kind of want to, since we kind of already answered a previous topic questions, do we want to dig into where pop culture paganism kind of inserts itself / finds itself in all this?
Shit, yeah. So
because I think it's actually important to talk about, not because I happen to practice it, but because it's a live football.
Yeah. And I think this plays into, so this was a question posed by a listener at some point. I don't remember who and I don't remember when. I think it was
I don't either.
Party. But 100%.
Oh, come on. You've got like a whole hour before your bedtime. I was gonna say something similar. I appreciate Josie for voicing it.
We'll see. Depends on how quickly we walk this up. We'll see.
All right.
All right, so pop culture paganism. I'm guessing this will probably be our last topic for the night because we're at over an hour now. But pop culture paganism. So for me, this is a very normal and natural extension of animism, which is roughly the belief that all things can at bare minimum, if not do, have an animating spirit of some kind. Everything from broad topics and ideals all the way down to individual items, the computer that I'm on. Even you can even go really, really granular with it, like the individual wires in the computer or the sections of the wire, etc., could have individual spirits. Some people do, some people don't go that granular with it. That depends on the person and the system. But pop culture paganism is, for me, a very natural extension of animism, right? Like if the mythological figures that are the gods that I tend to worship and work with have agency and spirit, it's very difficult to find a distinction that is meaningful between that and modern mythologies around, from an American example, say Johnny Appleseed or Superman. Right?
Sure. So I'm gonna let you finish because I have a rant.
Yep. Now this is not to say that Odin and Superman are equivalent spiritually. I don't believe that. I think that there is distinction, and if you go from a very kind of pop culture paganism, gods are egregores who are given power by their worshippers and knowledge, or more towards my end, where gods and spirits have something inherent to them that gives them more or lesser extensive power that can be changed over time. Right. I think that Odin, as example, is significantly more powerful than in both of these theological cases. I think that Odin is significantly more powerful than Superman. That doesn't mean that Superman doesn't exist and isn't someone that you can talk to.
But what about his power level?
It's over 9,000.
Thank you.
Which is to say that while I may not participate in, that doesn't mean that I, in any fashion, want to denigrate someone who works primarily in a pop culture paganism sense, right? Like if most of the spirits that you work with are fictional characters or very modern concepts and spirits, does it work for you? Cool. Are you hurting anyone? No? We're all good. Do I think that it certainly goes very too far sometimes? Yes, but I think the same thing happens with more traditional paganism.
No, Maleck, don't!
In a very
you can't criticize our own. What are you doing?
Right? Like, well, no, in a very real sense. Like, I get overly silly about things a lot of the time. So does Sarenth. Like, fucking.
No, I am serious all the time. Stoic forever.
That's part of the problem, my friend.
No.
No, like it's like, yeah, can I get overly involved and way too fucking serious sometimes? Yeah, I can take myself too seriously. I can take my gods too seriously. I I can also take them not seriously enough, and that's like the problem goes both ways. I think there are some real dangers with pop culture paganism that are a lot, but a lot of those are based around discernment, and I think a lot of those problems apply to more traditional paganism. I think they're not quite as prevalent, but that might be confirmation bias. Minimum one Sarenth rant per episode. I thought that was one minimum Maleck rant per episode. Both. Yes.
So
yeah, go ahead.
So are you comfortable with stating?
Please,
okay,
please go for it.
My issue with pop culture paganism isn't that it's not serious; it's that it doesn't take itself seriously enough. Because if you think through the logical implications of worshiping Batman, and I'm using this example because anybody who's followed my blog for long enough time knows I had a beef with the Sons of Batman. The Sons of Batman was a pop culture pagan group that apparently worshipped Batman. My issue was not that they worshipped Batman. My issue was which fucking version. Are you talking Adam West? Are you talking Batman 89? Are you talking Val Kilmer? Because those Batmen are exceptionally different. Are you talking Crisis on Infinite Earths? Are you talking about Post-Crisis? Are you talking about Injustice Batman? These are different beings. Do you know what the fuck you're talking to? My issue with pop culture paganism is not that they're worshiping pop culture deities. It's that oftentimes they will not or cannot articulate what they're talking to, why, and how.
And that goes back to what I was kind of saying about discernment. But I would posit that a similar problem applies to, not to the same degree necessarily, but I think that a similar problem applies to more traditional paganisms. Take, for example, Apollo. Which Apollo are you talking to?
Right.
Are you talking to the Roman Apollo or the Greek Apollo? Because that's the same word, the same name,
right,
in a wildly different cultural context that may or may not have supposed to have been the same being, and at least in the cultural context, occupied wildly different places. Are you talking to Apollo Lycaos? Or are you talking to Apollo of the Oracles of Delphi?
Are you talking to the Apollo who brings plagues?
Right?
These are different god forms. Well, not god forms, but different aspects of the same god. You should know what you're talking to.
Unless they're wildly different gods, right? For example, if you look at where the Romans put their god names on everybody.
Interpretatio Romana.
Yep. Interpretatio Romana. Right where, this is the Mars or the Mercury of the Germans. Reminds me of the AGF episode where y'all interviewed JD.
I remember that episode.
Gosh! An AGF episode where y'all interviewed Jason Davis, and the intro quote was, "Oh, I'm sorry, you got Dom Daddy Dionysus, LOL." Yeah.
The best part is that Jason's straight as a fucking arrow.
Right.
And that's who he got. I fucking love it.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, Dionysus is another good example of this. Are you talking about Roman Bacchus, or are you talking about Greek Zagreus? Even from like a purely anthropological standpoint, a lot of anthropologists differentiate between Zagreus Dionysus, who was very often the figure for mystery cults, and Dionysus, who was more of a roughly exoteric popular deity, and they were very different figures. They had domains over very different things. They shared some similarities, but it's not uncommon.
Their cultists couldn't have been more might and fucking day.
Right. It's not uncommon for anthropologists to say these are basically different gods who share the same name. Or are these the same being? Right? Like, and that's the thing. And I think that problem of discernment, which we have the same problem with a lot of pop culture paganism. And I think that problem applies just as well to traditional paganism, to use that term.
It's not a problem that is specific to pop culture paganism. It's just more highly reified.
Yeah,
because you can see Batman 89 is very different from Batman from Injustice, is very different from Kevin Conroy's Batman from the animated series.
yeah, and I think in no small part that has to do with the amount of canon that we have for Batman versus, say, Odin, right?
I think that's actually a funny part of pop culture paganism that I don't think is remarked on enough, is these motherfuckers actually have canon, whereas for the most part for our gods, we don't.
Yeah.
I can go back to Batman in 1943 and I can show you the comic where he hangs the guy from the backlighter.
Yep. And the original Batman, like the very first couple of issues, he had a gun.
Right. He did not give a fuck. He was like the Shadow with bat ears.
Right? Like it's very different. But also that gets into another thing of, does the canon make the character?
If you understand how the canon of the character is shaped by society versus how the character might naturally have come about as a result of the society, it's actually very funny. So if you think about the comic books Code Authority, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus, I'm going to use Batman from the animated series because he's the one that I know the best and I have the most attachment to. So the Batman from the animated series, part of the reason that his stories were shaped the way they were, why was the Joker so fucking disturbing? Well, it's because they couldn't straight up show the Joker killing people, because it would have desensitized the audience to the violence the Joker can do. Why is it so much creepier? Because that Joker gas doesn't go away at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
You don't just put a body tarp over it and truck it away. You get to see the Joker's fucking grin stretched over every face in the room.
Yeah.
That's more disturbing than seeing a whole shitload of bodies, because you get to see how he completely affects people. Now, granted, they take him off screen a couple minutes later, but goddamn, is it, as a kid especially, it's striking. It stays with you. The death of the Joker, and I'm sorry for spoiling, but like it's been out for 20 fucking years. The death of the Joker in the Batman Beyond movie, The Return of the Joker, is more disturbing to me, both as a teenager and as an adult, than the ending that they were planning for. The ending they were planning for is Tim Drake shoots him in the chest with one of his Joker guns. The one that ended up happening was he shoves him into a pile of water into one of his machines and then barbecues his ass with a fucking machine.
Jesus.
And he screams off stage, and it's one of Mark Hamill's famous screams. It is so much more haunting. Yeah. It made things so much worse. So even in this, the effect of a character effectively dying on screen is so much more disturbing than them actually getting shot.
Yeah. Well, and what I was getting at, though, was maybe slightly to the left of what I think you're talking about, which is, so take, for example, the fact that the mouse now has control over a huge amount of...
Oh, shit, yeah.
Right?
A ton.
And so, in a very real sense, the mouse is controlling a lot of modern mythology, right?
Right.
So, when Disney decides to make a change to a character, does that affect the spirit of the character, or does that not affect the spirit of the character?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, this is actually the kind of the point that I was getting to with regards to the Joker's death mattering in terms of whose network it's being shown on, because the network. The WB network, when they aired that movie, aired the one which was more disturbing, which was the Joker being barbecued to death by his own machine, right? So if you take this very small example of the Joker's death and you apply it writ large to the character, it makes actually a difference in how you understand and interpret the character, right?
Yep.
So like you said, like if Disney owns all this shit and they get to dictate what canon is or isn't, I think to a certain degree they get to dictate the spirit of this character.
I think they get to some degree, but I don't think they get to the degree that they might like.
Oh no, to be sure, because if Disney could dictate the framing of Thor, it would be completely excised from its mythological roots.
Right. But I think that it is. I think that these characters exist beyond just the pages that they exist on, or the screens or what have you. And I think that there is more to them than the canon that exists. Much like I think that there is more to the gods that I worship than the canons that exist.
Oh, absolutely.
I
actually think we do ourselves a disservice by saying canon, because canon implies canon law. Canon law implies immutable, God-given, divine stamp on things.
Right.
I think if we said this is what the written lore says versus my interpretation or my headcanon, that might be a little more freeing.
Right. And I think that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that there is a story cannot define a character in totality any more than a story can define a person in totality.
Sure.
Characters are people, in my opinion. And so
I actually have a counterexample for why stories matter so much. Please go ahead.
Oh, and I do not mean to say that they don't matter. I think that they matter a great deal, but also I actually got into an argument with someone that I have a great deal of respect for. We just were at cross thoughts on this at the time. And I won't get into the super details of the argument because that's not what we're talking about at the moment. But I think that the point that I was making during the argument is that the idea of a canon or complete corpus of mythology is an oxymoron. It's nonsense on its face.
Right.
Because that would deny the ability for there to be new mythology.
Sorry, there's no new myths.
Right.
Our skulls are all tapped out. We can't write anymore.
Right, and I think that's nonsense on its face. And I think the same applies to pop culture paganism with regards to, like, using Batman as an example. The canon of Batman canon will change, right? Certain stories, depending on who
shot his parents. Joe Chill wasn't always the guy.
Right? Like, who controls the rights to him might change the canon, but also full on, and I'll say this knowing that there is a lot of contention on this topic, but death of the author. Fuck what Disney says, fuck what even the author intended. It is living in the mind of the reader. It is the relationship is influenced by the author, is influenced by the creator, but the relationship is between the story in the reader, and in a very real sense, then the character as portrayed through the story and the reader.
If I might,
yeah,
the exoteric is the literal pages of the comic you're reading. The esoteric is how you relate to it.
Fair, yeah. I would tend to agree with that metaphor. Yeah.
Like the esoteric, I cannot dictate to you how you understand Batman or how he affects you as a character affecting a character. But I will tell you that Kevin Conroy is the voice I hear when I think Batman.
No, that's legit.
And it blew my mind as a baby queer to know that he is gay. Well, was. Like, seriously, rest in peace, Kevin. And it blew my mind as a young kid to realize that the Joker was Mark Hamill. And he is still the voice I think of when I think of the Joker.
Yeah.
And I think that this model of relationality is completely valid with regards to our own gods, because pop culture affected me when I came to heathenry. I did not see Thor as a red-haired, red-bearded man. I saw him as blonde. That is absolutely a Marvel thing, and I still often do.
Yeah, no, I still do to this day. Like, I don't work with Thor very often, but he lives on my altar. Right there, he has a place on my altar for whatever reasons I won't get into. But like, he has a place on my altar, and yeah, no, I still get him as blonde. I don't get him as red-haired. Is that completely pop culture? Yeah, absolutely. That
absolutely.
100% influenced by Marvel. I still get him as blonde. That is still how I get him most of the time.
Yep. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you're acknowledging, hey, this is the frame through which I'm understanding these gods. And likewise, like, my issue is not with pop culture paganism as such. As a thing that exists. My issue is not that it exists. My issue is that it doesn't take itself seriously enough to investigate its own claims.
Yeah. And I think the same complaint.
I'll say broadly, because the people that I've interacted with was several years ago. 2016 was damn near, 8 years ago now?
Yeah. I was gonna say you're at 7 going on 8 years. Like,
Jesus.
But yeah, no, and I think the same. I don't think it happens quite as often, and I think that has to do with kind of cultural milieu that I can't exactly put my finger on. but I think it does happen, though not quite as often with traditional paganisms. But like, I think that these things can still apply.
I honestly think that it matters who's in your local community, because I hear a lot more stratification from West Coast communities than I do East. Yeah, and especially Midwest communities. Midwest folks don't tend to give a shit as much as the East and West do.
Yeah,
and I say that as a very broad brush.
Actually, and that kind of brings up a point. In your latest, not your latest blog post, your second latest blog post, the one that I asked for, you talked.
Yeah, fuck you, by the way.
Ha! You're welcome. I warned you straight up in the topic.
I know.
I'm surprised you made it fit in one post instead of.
Me too. I was very proud of myself.
Yep. But yeah. So one of the things you said was that a thing that you find to be a major bugbear in the community is the people relying too heavily on lore and not relying heavily enough, or not giving themselves enough room for personal experience. And flatly, that's not my experience of the community at all. Right? Like, very much my experience is your relationship, and the lore can only do so much.
I think it's because of the amount of years I've spent and the people that come to me when they come to me.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because a lot of my experience with the community has been over the course of almost 20 years. As of next year at Samhain, I'll have been a pagan for 20 years. And things have shifted, but I still occasionally get people who are like, I don't know about this thing. And I'm like, yeah, you fucking do. You're just looking for confirmation, and that's fine.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just interesting. Like you're saying, it depends highly on your community. And like, yeah, the community, the circles that I tend to run in, that's not really a thing. That's not really
no. I mean, you're ass deep in polymysticism, though.
Yeah.
Your communities, especially because of the ones you've cultivated, tend to be exceptionally more accepting internally and externally of experience.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Like we said earlier, I'm somehow more into esotericism than you are, which is absolutely wild to me. But it's fine.
There's a lot less of you that is front facing.
Yeah.
There's a lot less of you, by requirements of the religious path you're walking, that can be front-facing. A lot more of me has to be front-facing for the work that I do.
Yeah. No.
And a lot of you cannot be front-facing for the work you do.
Yeah.
Neither of us is better than the other. I think that you provide an exceptionally valuable thing. And not only have I seen the cumulative effect of pack magic on the people you've touched, but your own life as an example. And I think this is the power of esotericism at work, is that it opens up so many avenues of exploration that strict exotericism cannot open these doors, purely because the personal component and the behind closed doors component of I am experiencing this thing cannot hope to touch. And I do not mean that as a slam against people whose practice is entirely exoteric. If you don't have time for esotericism, that is totally your business. You're not less or more than I am.
But
But I will say, as a person who is ass deep in esotericism, there's some serious benefits to my practice therein.
Yeah, and I think it's the openness to it, right? If you're not open to the esoteric, that's the problem. Just as if you denigrate the exoteric, that's also a problem. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm kind of careful where I walk these lines, not only because of the communities I'm in, but because I don't want some random schmuck coming up on this episode and be like, well, those guys are real dicks to people who just like to hail Thor. I'm like, no, if that's all you want to do with your life, that is completely valid and fine.
Yeah, dude, do your thing. Like, does it make you happy? Does it benefit you? Cool. Are you hurting anyone?
Happy? Great.
Right? Like,
yeah. This is a good point.
In the case where I can see it mattering is if you're picturing, say, Tom Hiddleston as Loki and taking Marvel's version more seriously than the original myths, and how that shows up is hair color. Yeah.
Well, since Loki's hair isn't actually explained in the myths, from what I remember, his hair can be whatever the fuck you want it to be. Like, Thor's hair color is remarked upon because of the implications of red. Because of red and red blonde. Because it means... So, here's the fun part. Does it mean blonde because it says red? Because red is often used as a heading for fucking gold.
Yeah.
So is it actually blood? We don't fucking know because, like, do we know? Were they trying to be cutesy wootsy with it? Were they trying to be like, it's red, like, how gold is red, like, fucking smartasses.
It also could be, and if I remember correctly, that was because gold used to have often more iron impurities in it that would show up, so it had more of a red tint to it. And also part of the potential implication is because if I remember correctly, it's his beard specifically that is remarked.
His beard is remarked as red. Now, you can be a blonde-haired, red-bearded motherfucker.
Right.
I've seen it.
And the thing that pops into my head is Thor is often associated very directly with violence. And right. So
is it blood in his beard?
Is it just blood in his beard? Is that what we're talking about here? Like, that's a potential implication. There's also the implication of is that in implications of culture mixing, right? There's a lot of potential implications there.
And the question is, like, also this, historically people didn't always categorize color the same way we do here and now. Absolutely. Like, when you think of corpse, what do you think of the color of? If you're in America, you think usually black. But there, it would have been blue.
That's funny.
Why?
I think of blue when I think of corpses.
I've worked with corpses. I think of blue.
Yeah.
But your average American thinks black.
That's interesting. Also, yeah, color as a whole thing, like
color spectrum, color theory.
Oh, it's so fucking
toss that shit out the window when it comes to looking at historical sources.
Right. So as one of the major examples is the Roman word that became maroon, I think.
Oh boy.
Also included, it was one of the shades of red, like a deeper red, what we think of as a deeper red.
Yeah.
Also included colors that we would today consider gold and turquoise.
Turquoise?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Colors that we would today think of as more yellow toned and more blue toned were included.
Oh, that makes sense because the spectrum of dyeing. Yeah.
But like these were considered the same color.
Huh, interesting.
The same word applied equivalently to all of these different what we today would consider different colors. These would be considered the same color. Now, I'm sure that there's a lot more nuance to that I'm missing. This was like an example that I heard one time in one class a long time ago. I'm sure that there is a lot more to it. And someone could correct me. I could be completely wrong. But color systems in general are wildly complicated. And one of the best examples of, language is socially constructed and how you view the world is wildly affected by your language.
Is the sky blue?
Only if blue is a color that you recognize.
Right. So in esotericism, if you apply this same logic, if I am using language that is highly specialized, if I'm using language that doesn't quite communicate across the aisle, it doesn't matter how accurate it is if you can't grasp it.
Exactly.
So, kind of, I know you're starting to need to wind down
a little bit, and we're coming up on an hour and 40.
This has been a fun discussion. I've enjoyed it. I mean, I'm also a guy who's like, Cookie, I'm right with you. I've done color theory. They're all so different. Yes. Yeah. And it also is culturally dependent on what a desirable color is. And once you figure out the historicity of why purple was such a valued color, you start to like go, ew, because a bunch of smelly snails needing to be the perfect color purple for your emperor robe makes it a whole lot less appealing.
But
I think that where I eventually come down to with regards to esotericism, exotericism, and all the rest, and theology in general it's an unfolding process. Mm-hmm. And we could not hope to encapsulate even a portion of what that experience is like with these episodes. I at least hope what we've done with these is given you like a somewhat drunk introduction to concepts of theology as we experience them.
Yeah. And I think my closing thought is really theology. I think of much like I think of philosophy, writing in general, a lot of thought in general is I don't particularly care what conclusions you come to as long as two conditions are met. one, you can back it up with rational thought, and two, you can demonstrate that you're not hurting people, at least to the best of your ability. Right? Like, you can't mitigate all harm. That's not a thing.
Right.
But like, so much as it is within your power, you are not hurting people and are hopefully even helping people. Cool. Your theology is good. Let's move on. And can you back it up with some kind of rational thought, discernment, etc.? Yes, cool.
Does your system make any kind of sense internally?
Yeah, we will come to different conclusions.
We should. My experience is not going to be yours. My Odin is not going to be your Odin. Your pack is not going to be my pack.
Yep.
Because if they are necessarily reflective of the whole and of me, they can't look the same.
Exactly. And so, that's kind of where I come down to it on theology. And also, yeah, like you said, theology is an unfolding process. It can and will continue to change and grow as my experiences and thoughts do. Like, that's the nature of the beast. If your theology never changes, you're not doing theology, in my opinion.
You're doing dogmaticism.
Yeah.
These are different.
Yeah.
Theology is a process that you go through with whatever gods, ancestors, and Vatir you do or don't have relationship with.
Yeah.
As well as yourself.
Yourself and your community at large.
Right.
That is people that you are directly involved with religiously, or people you just see on the internet who are like, here's my thoughts about a system completely.
Have you thought about this?
Right? Like, I get a lot of good theological thought from Christian theologians I see online, and it's like, that has fucking shit all to do with me, but it gets me thinking about things in a specific way, and I come to conclusions that may or may not be applicable. And if they're not, cool, it was a neat thought experiment, and if they are neat, I might have had my world changed by something I saw online. And that's good. That's not just fine, it's good.
All right, folks. I think that's thank you for the final thoughts, Maleck, and I think that's going to close us out for episode 42, Theology Part 3. Thank you all for joining us. I will see you all in the after party in a few minutes. I'm going to do night prayers, and then I will hop on.
I will be too, although I won't be around for as long as normal, but, that's fine. New jobs are what they are. Talk to y'all later. It was a wonderful time, and very much looking forward to the next episode.
Yes.
David
join us for August.
Yeah, August, we're having David Shee, author of Spirit Voices. I have it right here, actually, because reasons. David Shee, author of Spirit Voices, The Mysteries and Magic of North Asian Shamanism. So really looking forward to that episode, and we will catch y'all next time.
Yep, that is scheduled for the first week in August, so please join us.
August 1st is actually
the first. 7 p.m. EST.
Yep, absolutely. Have a good time, y'all.